cosmology or from astronomy or from any of this publicly available evidence. I think it's separate, to refer to the previous question, it's a separate question what scientists believe, the scientists, and what the best scientific evidence we have is. That's why I insisted on trying the argument that I made previously on the best evidence we have, the things we have very good reason to believe are true. It's quite the case that scientists and literary theorists and philosophers believe all sorts of things. And so we want to ground our arguments in the best evidence that we have. But I don't think all of the religious questions that every human being could ask is going to be discerned or answered from these publicly available evidences. The truth of the matter is, Thomas Aquinas pointed out, as important as the arguments for God are, if everyone had to know those arguments, very few people would believe in God. It's sort of the grandma problem. You know, my grandma doesn't know the theistic proofs. And even though I've studied them, I actually forget the arguments myself and have to bone up on them again before discussions such as this. And so we can have direct experience of God, an intuitive experience of God, but that can't be the basis for our arguments for others, like a private revelation. You might have a private revelation that justifies your belief in God, but it's not a public argument. So that's why I hope we will decide these questions insofar as we can on the publicly available evidence, and rest content that questions such as the purpose of your life or my life are more fine-tuned or precise questions, and we're going to get answers from the evidence we're considering.
Thank you, Christopher.
Tertullian, one of the church fathers, said that one of the great things about being in heaven was you'd be able to watch the writhings and the tortures of those who'd been sent to hell. And I think what I mainly live for is contemplating the misfortunes of other people.
Well, that leads me to a very...
That and vindication, being proved repeatedly and over again right when other people were wrong. That does a lot for me. But raising the sights just a fraction, I'd say that to me that what matters most is the pursuit of happiness, in the words of our greatest founding father, and the pursuit of liberty, freedom. And that these things are incompatible, completely incompatible with the worship of an unalterable celestial dictator. Someone who can watch you while you sleep and convict you of thought crime, and whose rule cannot be challenged, and who's the big brother whose eternal reign may not be disputed. That makes the concept of the pursuit of freedom and happiness completely negative, negates it. So one of the things I live for is to return a stout and joyful non-serviam to this dictator, who I'm pleased to find doesn't really exist, but is instead a creation of those who want to install a theocracy in the real life where I can participate, and I'm not going to give them an inch. The second thing I live for is, if not exactly passing on my genes, taking part in activities that might allow those genes to be passed on. And not scorning the three delightful children who are everything to me and who are my only chance of even a glimpse of a second life, let alone an immortal one. And I'll tell you something, if I was told to sacrifice them to prove my devotion to God, if I was told to do what all monotheists are told to do, and admire the man who said, yes, I'll gut my kid to show my love of God, I'd say, no, fuck you.
Thank you.
And so should you, and the religions that say you should admire infanticide as proof of the love of God have no claim at all to be preaching ethics, let alone morality.
So then are you opposed to abortion? Christopher,
oh, please.
Christopher, so does that mean that are you involved in the pro-life movement in that case?
I believe that the concept unborn child is a real concept, yes. And I've had a lot of quarrels with some of my fellow materialists and secularists on this point. I think that if the concept child means anything, the concept unborn child can be said to mean something. And actually all the discoveries of embryology, which have been very considerable in the last generation or so, and of viability, appear to confirm that opinion, which is, I think it should be innate in everybody, is innate in the Hippocratic Oath, is instinct in anyone who's ever watched a sonogram, and so forth. So yes is my answer to that.
Excellent. Let me
have some questions.
Yeah, here's a question from a Simon Johnson from From Houghton, Michigan, of the Evangel Baptist Church. This is directed to Christopher Hitchens. How does the law of the conservation of matter, that no matter can be created or destroyed, factor into the theory that out of nothing all matter was suddenly created, the so-called Big Bang theory?
Well, there must be, in fact, I happen to know there are many people in the audience better qualified to answer that question than I am. If you read, say, Lawrence Krauss's account of the Big Bang, or Stephen Weinberg's The First 3 Minutes, what you have to picture is something like a baseball, out of which in a fraction of a millisecond, 400 billion galaxies are about to burst. The fact of the matter is we are not able to picture that. We can picture something like the second law of thermodynamics and conservation of matter. We can't. Our minds won't do this job. Remember, the term Big Bang was invented, like the term suffragette or the term impressionist or Tory, as a term of abuse by Fred Hoyle. He said there are some people who think, it all began with the Big Bang. The overwhelming evidence now is that it did, and that everything was inside that baseball until... So I was once asked by an intelligent child to whom I was trying to draw this picture, my daughter actually, my younger daughter, okay, what was outside the baseball? You can't do that. You can't do that. Einstein couldn't do that. Fred Hoyle couldn't do that. Weinberg can't do it. Krauss can't do it. No one can do that.
Maybe Jay Richards.
But I yield the floor. But I think anyone who's willing to make a leap of faith might possibly do it. So I yield the balance of my time to...
Yeah, and of course, we both agree, obviously, on the veracity of Big Bang cosmology. I mean, an implication of Big Bang cosmology, you can just sort of think of it as running back the tapewords on cosmic time, so that there's a point, sometime in the finite past, as it has been put, in which all of space and matter are compressed into a point of infinite density in zero volume. That's the picture to which Arno Penzias responded. Penzias was the co-discoverer of the cosmic background radiation, that this is what he would have been led to expect by the 5 books of Moses. Now, Penzias is a Jew. He believes in God. But he saw this as in some way a confirmation of what he believed the fundamental truth of his religion told him, which is that the universe is not self-existent, but had a beginning in the finite past and was caused or called into existence by God. Now, this is a remarkable discovery. I cannot think of a more decisive contradiction of the materialist worldview than direct empirical evidence that the material universe, matter, space, time, and energy itself, came into existence in the finite past. And it confirms what St. Augustine himself said, which is that God created time along with the physical universe. This is not a mathematical proof of God's existence. But if you're weighing the evidence, this looks to be pointing in the theistic direction.
This is the best opportunity you'll ever have to answer the question I posed at the beginning, which you didn't answer subsequently. In that case, why can we be sure that nothingness is about to be delivered to us instead of somethingness? By the extraordinary events that I just described, the heat death of the universe, the doubling of the speed at which it's expanding away from itself, and the collision of our galaxy with the galaxy Andromeda, which is booked for 5 billion years from now. So our somethingness is certain to be replaced, not in infinite but finite, measurable, predictable time with nothingness, and you have nothing to say about that plan, that planner, that design, or that designer. You can't go on ducking this question any longer in my submission. Everyone's waiting with bated breath for you.
I don't think that there's anything in the theistic view of the world that entails the universe is eternal. I think Mr. Hitchens is assuming some particular perspective that I do not represent.
The life everlasting?
The life everlasting in Christian theology, no, is not just a metaphor. It describes a transformation of the physical universe as we see into something of which we see a foreshadowing in Christ's resurrected body. I don't think that that doctrine is inferable from physics or cosmology, though, nor do I claim that. So that's why I'm not speaking of it.
Okay, let's go on to the next question. This is from And by the way, 5 billion years. I must say, I give you credit, Christopher, for worrying about what's
I'm
going to
really
happen
not worried about
billion,
that also.
5 billion years from now.
It's pretty soon.
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting when I'm on.
Well, it's a lot nearer than the Big Bang.
Well, it's interesting when I'm on this.
We're a lot closer to that than the origin.
When I'm on the shows on CNBC, I can't get them to talk about anything more than tomorrow. Anyway, this is from Pastor Paul Price of Indiana, Pennsylvania, where I recently was, actually. Mr. Hitchens, does it not take more faith to take your position that all things just evolved from nothing than to believe in intelligent design by God?
It doesn't involve any faith at all, is the answer to that. By the way, on this point about 5 billion years not being very long, there was a lecturer who was giving this point about Andromeda, and someone got up and said, "Did you say 5 billion or 5 million?" And the lecturer said, "I said 5 billion." He said, "That's a relief, 5 million. So relax now." It is, in fact, as everyone here has studied physics, even in as little as I have, in cosmological time, very, very soon. I mean, we can already see Andromeda with the naked eye. It's beginning to fill our night sky. We're a lot nearer to this than we are to the Big Bang, about which people speak so confidently as God's presumable work. So get real about that, I would. There is no, if you assume evolution by natural selection, no act of faith is required, because everything works on that assumption. You can, if you're faced with a new virus, sequence its DNA, show its kinship with your good self, work out how to defeat it, work out perhaps how to preempt the next. Predictions can be made. This is not just a theory, as some people are fond of saying. It's a bit better than that. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with being a theory. It's a theory which survives tests. Whether applied to discoveries in the remote paleontological past, or the present biological moment, or the very fairly predictable biological and immunological future. We can rely on it. It's not a matter of faith at all. It's what happened. It's in the molecular biological record, and it's in the fossil record. There is no question but that evolution by natural selection did occur. There is some question about how, and these gaps are being filled in. Whenever new evidence is discovered, it is found to be congruent with, compatible with, the existing knowledge in the field. No one is entitled any longer, and in fact the effort's almost been given up, to assume that the gaps produce a mystery which can only be filled by an explanation from the supernatural. That's now considered to be too lame for most public consumption, unless you go to the Ohio Museum with the animatronic children and dinosaurs.
By the way, who considers...
Which I recommend, by the way, that you do.
Who does consider it that lame, Christopher?
What?
You said it's considered that lame.
It's considered pretty lame
but
to...
Who considers
it's considered pretty lame, I find. I can't... Our comrade of this evening, for example, hasn't taken the opportunity to plead that case. I find it's increasingly rare among creationists to find that those who subscribe to it will argue the God of the gaps as confidently as they once used to.
But when
it hasn't happened tonight.
But you said it's considered. I mean,
well, I'm saying, I'll rephrase if you like. It appears to be uttered with considerably less confidence and frequency than it did. I notice the Reverend Comity is even nodding there.
Change. Jay?
Yes, again, I hope someone is taking count of the subjects that are being discussed and the number of insults that are being hurled from one or the other podium tonight. But I fully agree. I don't think the arguments... I don't think the argument before us tonight about theism or atheism ought to be based on the things that we don't know. I think it ought to be based on the things we do know. And I think we do know with a fair degree of certainty that the universe is not eternal, but it came into existence in the finite past, so that it forces upon us a fundamental question that deals with one of the first principles of logic. The universe had a beginning. We know something doesn't come from nothing. Everything that has a beginning has a cause for its existence. The universe had a beginning, so it must have had a cause for its existence. It can't have caused itself to come into existence. This is a strongly theistic piece of evidence drawn from the best science of the day. And we seem to be talking about Mormonism, we seem to be talking about the various crimes of various religions, but we seem not to be talking about the public evidence on which I think the case for theism needs to be made in the 21st century. And so I hope you're taking account of that. I hope you remember the basis on which the evidence is being made.
Wait a second. Wait. It's not.
Right, I
you
can
have to write down the questions if you want them answered.
Right. I can say we discussed the infinite regress question earlier. The claim is not, again, that everything has a cause for its existence. If the universe were eternal, if we had some reason to think the universe is eternal, then the universe itself wouldn't require the question. But we have empirical reason to think the universe began to exist. Every view of the universe, of reality, is going to have a